Now, in other news, it appears that we've reached an impasse with Poland, and not for the first time. Israel's government recalling its ambassador to Krakow following Poland's passing of the so-called restitution law, which essentially puts a 30-year limit on any restitution claims, including property. And whether by design or not, this means that Poland effectively is releasing itself from any responsibility over any and all unresolved Holocaust-era claims, i.e. all existing claims for restitution filed by living Holocaust survivors and their descendants after 1975 are likely to be nullified. Joining me now with more insights is former Labour Party Knesset member and Secretary General of the Claims Conference, Colette Avital. Colette, thank you so much for being with us. It's a pleasure to have you. Now, where did this law come from? Why was Poland so insistent to pass it?
Thank you for having me. The law is not only about Holocaust assets or of Jewish properties. It is a general law that does not allow anymore any kind of restitution. As you said, claims that have been made earlier than 30 years are null and void, and even claims that are being processed now are being not taken into account anymore. Where does it come from? Very difficult to say. What we see in Poland in the past few years is a lack of desire, a lack of readiness to take responsibility for what the Polish government did and not the Nazis. Polish government and the Prime Minister say we have been victims. It is not us, it is the Nazis. Well, it is true that the Nazis are responsible for the Holocaust. It is also true that it is the camps, the concentration camps were built by the Nazis on the territory of Poland. But it is also true that these properties were not seized by the Nazis. The war ended in 1945. The Nazis, as you know, were defeated and left Poland already in January of 1945. What we're speaking about are properties which in fact were nationalized, taken over by the Polish government. In other words, this is a Polish responsibility and not a German responsibility. Now, Poland was one of the countries that signed the declaration, which was made by 46 countries in Prague in 2006, which is called the Terezin Declaration, where all the European countries undertook the responsibility to return properties, especially now we're talking about Holocaust survivors who had to leave Poland, who couldn't get back their properties, certainly couldn't get them back during the communist era. So we're talking about the fact that elderly people, Holocaust survivors included, cannot have justice made to them anymore.
Well, so I want to ask you again, you mentioned this earlier, and I kind of hinted at it as well, that this 30-year limit on, or statute of limitations, this 30-year statute of limitations on filing a claim is not ostensibly about the Holocaust. It doesn't say anything specifically about the Holocaust per se. However, it sounds like it sounds like it disproportionately affects claims related to the Holocaust. Is that the case? Or is there a ton of restitution claims that are completely unrelated that Poland is concerned about?
The law is a bit, it's very difficult to explain the legal part of all the situation, because people could put in claims based on two administrative ordinances that existed, and those have been, how shall I put it, have been considered unconstitutional in 2005. And this law comes and says they're null and void. So there's no legal basis now on which people can claim. But it is not only the Jews. You know, if you speak of 30 years ago, you couldn't put claims during the communist rule. So this is really nothing that we can say that is justified. But in any case, I have to make people understand that it is not only Jewish properties. The Jews, there were 3.5 million Jews in Poland before the war. Only 10% came back. So those that came back could not have access to their properties because many of their neighbors took them over. And we know that even in 1946, there were pogroms there. But when we're speaking now of the whole situation of properties, I think we are speaking about the fact that only 50% of the properties in total belong to the Jews. 85% belong to other communities. They're Polish people who immigrated to the United States. They're American citizens. They can have access to those properties as well.
Basically.
They cannot have access. So,
Right.
in fact, by the way, Poland did restitute some properties to the Americans in 1960. And now what the story is all about is another way of rewriting history, another way of embellishing history by saying we are not the guilty ones. Therefore, we're not responsible. We do not wish to take any responsibility. And by the way, this is really not new. This is the behavior of this government in the past few years. I'll remind you and certainly our spectators that the law which was passed in 2018 was
about Polish death camps.
Not only. I mean, the people who would say that there is a Polish responsibility also, that the Poles also, some of the Poles were responsible for the murder of Jews, should be taken to court for defamation. So it also limited the freedom of speech, the freedom of research, and so on.
All right, well, I think it'll be very interesting to see how this plays out with respect to future diplomatic relations between Israel, Poland, and really Poland and the rest of the world. Until we have more to discuss, though, thank you so much, Colette.
Thank you.